So as you can see, there's so many friends in this gathering. The topic I've chosen today is in some ways inspired by my long association in a number of for a number of different reasons with Punjab. But I'll tell you the secret towards the end of the talk. Uh, it has to do ostensibly with the relationship between masculinity and urbanization. This is not a study in gender relations, really. You might see aspects of it as I go along, but I don't want to peg it with gender studies, but it has something to do with it collaterally, you might say. The most important point that I'd like to bring to your notice is that during times of trouble, which can be because of war, it can be because of pestilence, disease, or whatever, or the movement from monarchy to republicanism to democracy, or from feudalism to capitalism, or from village to urban life. These are huge changes in society for people, and they have to reorient themselves quite drastically to be able to take account of the changing circumstances, altered circumstances. When these things happen during these moments, there's a great possibility of men going through a period of crisis. And this is really evident today, because in India, we see the transition from village to urban quite rapidly and vividly in front of us. In many ways, I might have said this earlier on some occasion, India is an ideal laboratory for social sciences because you see all kinds of things in this country, in this society, almost compressed in terms of time and space. So you can be sitting in one place and you can see the past and the present and the future all coalescing, village and the urban coming together. And you look at the village, you see the urban, you see the urban in the village. So all of this is happening in front of our eyes without any effort. You know, other people take a lot of trouble to get an ingress into some of these things, and we get to see them spontaneously all around us. I'm sorry. For those who didn't quite get the hang of what I said earlier, let me quickly encapsulate that. My point really is that during times of transition, let us say because of war, because of disease, because of shift from monarchy to republicanism, or more relevant to us, the movement from village to town, from a rural society to urban society, great changes happen in relationship between people. And in this particular instance, I want to talk about what happens to men and how do they take account of these changed circumstances. And on account of that, what kind of transitions are taking place in social relations. You will not hear from me the usual story about men behaving badly. You know, we won't talk about masculinity. It's all about corruption, crime, rape, violence, and so forth. And of course, men commit those things. But that's not something which I want to talk about. I want to talk really about what are the crises that men face at times like these. And I think this is worth looking into because it not only tells us about the present, but perhaps gives us a glimpse into the future as well. Now, it's somewhat like this, that if you look at the transition that we are going through today in our country from rural to urban, you will find something quite remarkable. And that is this, that there is nobody really in our society who's either all rural or all urban. There's a bit of both, and there's of course a question of weightage. In some cases, there's much more rurality. In some cases, more urbanity. But it's not as if somebody is totally divorced from the other. It reminds you of the famed dualism that has been talked about in classical literature between the garden and the citadel. The garden and the citadel, this dualism has occurred quite frequently in Western literature, particularly, say in the writings of Carl Jung or Nietzsche. And the idea really is that the garden is where everything is settled. a settled life, people know their place in society. Nobody's really intent on upsetting the apple cart. And nature seems to take primacy over anything else. And roles are well defined and visualized as something which is quite feminine. Things are there in place. Nobody has soaring ambitions. Nobody is seriously disappointed either because there are no ambitions. They live their lives the way their parents live their lives, and tomorrow will be just like today. On the other hand, counterposing the garden is the citadel. Citadel is where things happen. And citadel is, as you can imagine from the word itself, the etymologically it just comes from the word city, city to citadel. And this is where things happen, changes are taking place, and roles are uncertain. It's a very labile, unsteady ground. And it is the men who make the first forays into the citadel, not the women. The men go first. And this is an impact or effect, not impact, an effect of long patriarchy. The long effects of patriarchy is to send men out looking for jobs. Men must go out where things are uncertain. So it is the men who step out first to the citadel, and they have to encounter a world which they had not really known before. It's entirely new. In the garden, in the village, in the early times, roles were learned by rote. You got it from your parents and grandparents, and there was nothing spectacular about what you could do or you would even think of doing. In fact, ambitions were supposed to be curbed. And if you had soaring ambitions, you were a bit of a troublemaker. You know? But in the citadel, when you move to the city, you don't quite know what your ambition should be. All you know is you want to get a better life. But how you should get it, what are the modalities of it, all of that is very unclear. Which is why the citadel is a place where men go to, but they don't have a route map. There's no compass, there's no rudder, there's no oar. They're not there. But how do they navigate themselves is quite unclear. And which is why there is what I believe a surge of anxiety amongst them. When men go through anxiety, I call it anxiety. The surge of anxiety amongst them. What do I do now? Here I am. I'm supposed to be doing something important. I have left my family behind, and I am told that in the city there are ways of improving my condition, not only here, but on my family in the garden. They are there in the garden and supposed to look after them as well. So what do I do about it? And when men feel threatened, researchers have shown, when men feel threatened, they not only believe in pumping up their muscles, but they also exaggerate their strength because they feel threatened. It's like, well, it's almost primal in some ways. You find in animals
Urbanization
too,
and
when they feel threatened, the
masculinities.
hair stands up. They want to exaggerate their strength. And men too, when they feel threatened, they want to exaggerate their strength. And this is all the more relevant to bring to notice because when these men come from the village to the city, to the garden to the citadel, they don't find an easy upward mobility route. Their mobility is always restricted. Why? They believe is because of the entrenched classes who are already there. The entrenched classes who are already there are taking advantage of their position and blocking the upward mobility of these new entrants into the citadel. And these new entrants feel cheated. That here we are, working ourselves to the bone, but on the other side, we have this favored class of people, the spoiled brats, who are leading a good life because they have social connections. And because of social connections, they don't have to work hard. We are working hard. So in a place like Finland, for example, there was a distinction made between the corrupt people and the pure people. The pure people are these urban entrants who just come in, hardworking, not afraid of doing the daily toil. And on the other hand, you have the corrupt people who are having a good time, pot-bellied and quite happy with themselves. And these other hardworking sons of the soil, as it were going through such a rough deal because these other fellows wouldn't let them come up the ladder. And that was a major problem. And you find this in Europe, almost in every society. in Europe in the 19th century when they were moving from monarchy to republican thought, republican society arrangements. You find it through the French Revolution, for example. You find it everywhere that when the entrenched classes are really holding them back, and here we are, really good people, and we don't get a chance because of these other corrupt lots. So the pure people versus the corrupt people. You might remember Auguste Blanqui, who was a rebel and a full-time anarchist of sorts. Not a communist, rebel is a good word, also a socialist. He said that, we workers, he idealized the workers. He said, we workers are 6 feet tall. Hmm? And those other guys over there are fat and sloppy. We 6 feet tall workers are being undermined by these other people. So we are the pure people, the hardworking people. You might also remember Soviet Union's iconography, showed muscular men, all of the very muscular people with hammer and sickle doing a hard job. And these are the people, this hard-working lot, who are being undermined by the old-time pampered class. So much so that in France, for example, you might remember the picture of the flag-waving Marianne in the French Revolution. Marianne was waving the flag. That was supposed to be the symbol of nationalism, a mother figure waving the flag. Can I have um, a slide, please? Slide number 1. Anyway, so there's a mother figure. So you had, when the French Revolution happened at that time, the nation state was being formed. And you might recall that, am I audible to you? When the nation state is formed, almost everywhere, in Europe and later India as well, everywhere, with maybe some exceptions, I don't know, the mother figure is very important. The nation state is almost like giving birth to something new, and the mother figure was prevalent everywhere, in Germany, in France, in Italy, India, everywhere. In America, the mother figure was very important. And that's simply because nature was supposed to be something which is very natural, is coming into being. It was held back for other reasons. But now at last, nature is showing its nature has come out in its full glory with nature has come in full glory with the making of the nation. Now, what I want to show you, which is taking some time, is how the flag waving Marianne, Marianne was a symbol of the French Revolution and the symbol of the newly emerging French nation of France. How that symbol was so powerful in mobilizing people to make a nation. And after the nation is made, what do? We have to administer this darn nation. And administering is very difficult for making a nation. Administering a nation, you have institutions, you must set up all kinds of policies, you must think in terms of economic development, you must think in terms of social development, and what is worse, you must also think in terms of the enemy outside the gates. You must think of all these things. And the flag waving Marianne is of no use at this point. I think we can forget the slides. I think so. Let's forget it. Manoj, let's forget it. It doesn't matter. Please stop. There's no need for the slide. Let it be. I just thought it'll add some color to that presentation, but I think one should shut it off. It's fine. It's not that important. So, or is much better. The good old system. Let's go back to the garden. Forget the citadel. So now what happens is during the making of a nation, the mother figure is very important because, as I told you earlier, it's almost as if nature is giving birth to something new. The mother is giving birth to a child. So after the mother is given birth, you have to send the child to school. That's hard work. Then to college, etc., etc. So other administrative machineries become important because economic development, political development, guarding the nation state, militarily, all these things become important. And the Jacobins in France, for example, said that this Marianne figure is not going to do us any good anymore. This mother figure is over. Now we need a powerful masculine figure. And they thought of Hercules. and not Hercules waving the flag gently, but Hercules with his foot stamping over the Hydra-headed monster. And the Hydra-headed monster represented the old entrenched class, bad people, you know, and the new class, rising class, is what Hercules represented. Hercules was there to make sure that the rising class get a spot in the sun and is being held up by them. So the patriarchy of the old time, that was not important any longer, primarily because the roles of patriarchy were settled roles. And now when you come to the city, those roles are not really that important anymore. It's being something else. Then what happens is you have a war, let's just say. In a war, what do you need? You need a masculine figure. So then, for example, again, I'm going back to France. You have the masculine figure, very important, because France got a beating. I mean, the Prussians collared them and slobbered them, in the 1870s, and defeated France. And it was very difficult for France to take that humiliation. So there was this school books were made, the Third Republic, and after that defeat, then the Third Republic came up. That's a different history. But Third Republic came up, and they had to start schools again. There were two very important figures in the Third Republic. One was of Jules Ferry. Jules Ferry's job was really to make sure there'd be no influence. The church's influence would be zilch, zero, because they wanted to make a education system where church would play no role at all. Earlier, the church played an important role in France. The second person, which I want to talk to you about, is a man called Ernest Levis. And Levis is important for us because he was the one who devised school textbooks like our NCRT, school textbooks in which he emphasized the masculine role because he believed that they lost the war against the Prussians because the French were not masculine enough. So masculinity was emphasized in the school textbooks, not only to win wars, but also to economically develop France. The two went hand in hand. New masculinity that I'm talking to you about is a feature that does not depend on patriarchy because the old settled rules that patriarchy had devised, those old settled rules are not any longer. The elders were so important in the patriarchal system. You bowed to your parents, your grandparents. You might remember Ernest Gellner's famous phrase called the tyranny of cousins. Tyranny of cousins. They wanted to rule the family. I would say it's not tyranny of cousins so much as an oligarchy of cousins. They pay the obeisance to make sure that the past is replicated again in the present. That is the way in which the work. So the elders were looked up to. Now you come to a situation where the elders are not important anymore because they have not provided you with any guide, any instrument to navigate this entirely new world, which is incomprehensible to older people, and the younger people try to make sense of this new world and not getting very far. Don't try. No, don't try. It's over. So, I'm sorry, this is going to take a glitch. Yeah. So now the elders are not as much used as they were under patriarchy's regime. The elders can't help you anymore. And you will find that the new heroes are all self-made men. New heroes are not men who are descendants of clans or distinguished families. They're self-made men. Some of them may not be the most self-made because the self-made version. So the new heroes are people from business, sport, but you'll notice that all of these heroes are not sons of children of established families, but people who made And also, some of these heroes are characters in comic books. Superman, Batman, these are heroes. What's interesting is the parents of Superman, for example, Mr. and Mrs. Very ordinary like, sorry for it. Superman, their son, the boy that they raised, he is extraordinary. He breaks all the earlier boundaries. He's somewhat quite different. So the young people don't recognize that their parents are losers. They're boring people. They live boring lives. So I want something exciting. The exciting is new corporate new adventurers, new corporate backers.
So you are not audible properly. There is so much disturbance in the background.
Club too, and they're all self-made people. But in this community, women are not central. They're kind of focus other men.
Sir,
It's
you
a
are not audible.
man-to-man game.
Sir, you are not audible.
Male-to-male interaction. And anxiety, which I talked about earlier.
We cannot
becomes
hear.
about
We cannot
men
hear.
and women. And this competition between men is what makes for the break from patriarchy of yore into the masculinity of today, where the father, the parents are not as important. Who are important? The new
Manoj,
heroes.
sir, there is lot of difference, a lot of disturbance.
To the fore, simply because they're able to show.
Cipra, a lot of disturbance from your side. Please mute yourself.
As a corollary to this, you
So
also
nobody is
find
moving
there's
the
very big
PPT.
emphasis on bodybuilding, on muscles. And gyms sprout out everywhere. People spend a lot of time in gyms, not because they want to impress women, but because they have an internal censor. They're actually judging themselves against themselves, what they ought to look like. The very well-known quotation from a lady called Sateli, who said, the reason why men spend so much time in gyms today is because the body is the only thing they think they have control over. They don't have control over anything else. It's the body they have control over. So the body is what they want to work at and make it according to an ideal image, which they think is just about to be grasped by them if they work a little harder. If they work hard anywhere else, the outcome may not be very satisfactory. But if they work hard in a gym, it's almost guaranteed that they'll come out with this particular kind of physical structure, which will demonstrate their masculinity. Again, remember, it's not because they want to impress women, but they want to impress themselves. The internal censor is at work. And I think anyone who's been to a gym in, say, Chandigarh is full of gyms will probably, understand what I'm saying. That you're thinking of an image which is in your head, and that image is what you want to replicate in your body, because the body is one area where you believe you can control. So if I were to take a pit stop here, I'd say, what have we been through so far? First of all, there's an idolization and valorization of the self-made man. Number two, the public symbol is not so much a woman like it was, it's now very masculine. We're looking for a masculine symbol. Parents, number three, parents and elders are not important anymore, like they used to be. Instead, as I told you earlier, self-made heroes are. All of this put together makes a lot of sense. Not just because they spend time on pathological consequences in terms of suicides. Men commit a lot of suicides. The world over. Now I'm looking like a real man.
This is much better, sir.
So here I am. So now that I've been transformed, I must share the sad story with you that men commit suicides much more than women do, 3 times more. So 75% of suicides are by men, 25% by women. And do women threaten to commit suicide much more than men do, but men commit more suicide than women. And we don't quite know what the situation was in previous eras, but today we are pretty clear. For example, in I said three times 75%. Some cases, like in Germany and America, is a little higher. In Finland, I come to Finland again, is between USA and Belgium. In Soviet Union, is very high, it's 4 times higher. So it varies a lot. Why do I bring in Finland every now and then? I brought in Finland with suicide. I brought in Finland with pure and corrupt. The reason is that Finland is supposed to be the happiest country in the world, isn't it? If in the happiest country in the world this is happening, then you can imagine what's happening in ordinary countries, let alone countries like ours, which are way down the happiness ladder. Also, one more thing I must tell you, Finland is the only country in the world where fathers spend more time with their children than mothers do, 8 minutes. So Finland had that reputation as well to protect. In spite of all of that, Finland also goes through anxiety. It also goes through problems, the kind I mentioned to you, simply because the new world, the citadel, the new world, is a new world. And to understand and navigate and do well there is a lot of work, a lot of innovation. You must think on your feet. So while you are playing a role, you're actually writing the script as well. Judith Butler, who's a well-known feminist, she wrote, I think, very tellingly, and I think she was absolutely correct on that, that gender is not a noun, it's an adjective, it's a verb. You perform. Gender is performative. And I think what masculinity is today, in my particular rendition, is a performance. You're performing masculinity, and you're performing masculinity in relationship to other performing men. You're all performing together, you know. Um, I had written about this in the Times of India as well, that if you go to a party, even if it's a very modern setup, you go to a party, soon you'll find women on one side and men on the other. It's not because of patriarchy. It's simply because men like to talk about themselves. I did this and I did that, and sort of advertise themselves. And women talk about little things, like how's your family, and did it take a long time to catch a bus today, and things like that. And when you come out of a party, if husband and wife, and it's almost as if they've been to two different parties because they've talked to two different sets of people and two different kinds of ideas have come up. In fact, very often my wife comes and tells me that so and so has a problem with their children. I said, "What? I spent so many whole hour with him, and I had no idea at all." So men do what they call is report talk, and women do rapport talk. you know so there's a difference here which is very important, and not
Ah,
based on patriarchy at all. It's based on the fact that men have a certain problem in this new world, and they find it difficult to navigate in this new world. So what do we have? Self-made people. Okay, self-made people are looked up to. Number one, public figures are male. Number two, parents are not that important anymore. Parents are a boring lot, like Superman's parents were. And number four, this masculinity has a pathological side. The worst of it is not just wasting time in the gym, which may be good, not always pathological, but it leads people, men, to commit suicide in large numbers, and that, of course, is not a very happy thing. Now, this is the background. Okay. Now, let's see now, with your help and your encouragement, how does all of this fare in India? This is all you know, across the world. It's a general statement. And I think this general statement holds even for our country. Our country, in that sense, is not unique. It shares the same characteristics, though these characteristics are probably explicated differently. Number one, the entrenched classes are taking advantage, the fat, slobby, paunchy lot are taking advantage over the hardworking young men who come to the city looking for work. And this difference was captured, I think, very eloquently in political terms by the BJP, where they said Namdar versus Kamdar. Namdar versus Kamdar was exactly what in Finland they said corrupt people versus pure people. The Namdars are the ones who have, depending on the ancestral connections, on their political connections, and the Kamdars are the hardworking people, and they don't get a look in because the Namdars are ruling over. Likewise, when you think in terms of a public symbol, when you think of a public symbol, you'll find in our country, the whole idea of Lord Ram has come up as a male symbol, you know, and it has displaced all the earlier symbols. Mother India, as such, is not as important today as Ram is. Not only Ram, Ram has a companion, the muscular Hanuman. So the two muscular men, who are our public symbols today. Why is it so? It is because the whole generation of Kamdars feel that they represent him because he too is fighting against odds. He too is fighting like Ram fought against corrupt people, against the entrenched classes. And they feel that kind of comradeship with Ram in that sense. When the temple was being inaugurated here, I was not in Delhi, I was somewhere else, but I was amazed how many young men were so enthused by this entire idea of Ram. And the fact that there was Hanuman and there was no Sita around didn't seem to bother them. It was, yes, you're expressing something that we really feel deep down. Okay, all right. I think I shouldn't have brought up this question of slides at all. I just felt that, if you were to see the portrait of Hercules, Hercules standing there, a sword, and he's got his foot on the head of the Hydra-headed monster. It's quite a, evocative symbol. And on the other hand, you had Marianne wearing a flag. So they're two they're contrasting images, aren't they? And I think they reflect this new urge towards masculinity once the society is unsettled and the old world of patriarchy doesn't quite inform the current situation to any great extent. So in India again, is it all right? Shall I continue or what? Shall we all break for tea? No. Please hold on. But write it down. You know why? Because what you'll be saying is probably so good, and it'll change my tack completely. So, all right. Can't we go on? Unmuted. You all right? You all right? Okay, good. All right, fine. So now that's number one. So you have the male symbol, which has become very dominant in our public discourse today, which is, in a way, a demonstration of the point I made earlier with Hercules and Marianne, and it's happening in other countries too, and it's happening in our country as well. The reason for this happening here with with so much ardor is because India is contemporary India is strongly influenced by migration. 40% of our population are migrants. Can you imagine 40% are migrants in our country? And why do people migrate? Of course, women migrate primarily for marriage, but men migrate primarily for jobs. So, for economic reasons, men are migrating, and 40% of migrants in general, are are uh, are, are in India, and most of them, remember, are not illiterate. Most of them are literate migrants, and 15% of them are actually graduates. So it's not as if poor people are coming into cities and swamping the cities, with their ways of life. It is people who are ambitious, who want to do something with their lives, who are coming here. And remember one more very important feature, that is 70% of those who are more than 60 years old, 70% of those who are more than 60 years old live in villages. So the city is a place for the young and the restless. You know, the village is where old people live, and the city is where young people live. When I did my village studies, I used to do quite a bit of that in different parts of the country. I found one thing uniform, that if the parents were living in the village, the children didn't look up to them. They found their parents were not really up to much. Who did they look up to? An uncle, a cousin, a friend who was in the city. And there they were looking out the windows for some kind of recognition of the world outside, a signal, a beep on their mobile phone that will take them to a slum in Delhi, Nagpur, Kanpur, Surat, anywhere. So the city was where hope lay. Village is where hope dies, just like their parents have died. You know, village is hopeless, city is hopeful. So going to the city, going to and living in a slum is very, is upward mobility for them. And many of us who live in cities say the slum is a terrible place and look at this and that and the other. Of course, there's squalor and hygienic problems, there's crime, other kinds of issues. But for the person living there, this is the exit route. They're happy to be there. It's a hopeless village and the hopeful slum. So when they move out of there, their migration is something which is they're really struggling very hard to make something out of their lives. And they're not just wasters, they're coming here to make something of their lives and to improve the condition of their folks back home who are not up to much. But because of duty and loyalty, this is what they have to do. After all, as you know, agriculture is a dying occupation. What is there left in agriculture? 85% of land, anybody will tell you, is below 2 acres, 2 hectares. 85% of land. 66% is below 1 hectare. So what can you do on that? Even if you tried your level best, you can't do anything on handkerchief-sized plots. Most people have handkerchief-sized plots. Another anecdote, if you don't mind. So this is many years ago when I was working in West UP. I met a farmer. I had my notebook, as researchers do, and I asked this person in the village, "What do you do?" So, if I were now to go to my university and I make a presentation on the research work I've done, I'll say, I ticked this box. It said he's a farmer. Now, he didn't lie, I didn't lie, but the fact is not true because he doesn't actually farm. But why did he say I'm a farmer? He said I'm a farmer because farming is the only job he really knows. He knows farming. He can tell the soil, he can smell the rain in the atmosphere well before people like us can. He can pick up the soil and say how much water is required or not required, particularly in cotton farming. In cotton farming, it's very important to know how much water is in the soil before you add more water. In cotton farming, water has to be strictly calibrated, as some of you know quite well. So he knows all that, but he doesn't really farm because the land is so small. So given all of this, what does he do, the poor chap? He has to go out and look for a job. And every year, 55 lakh new entrants into the job market. 55 lakh. And about 5.5 lakh actually get some kind of job. But the majority of them don't get a job at all. Now, you can say, yes, it's a very bad time, and because of that, men are competing with women, and therefore masculinity has come up, which is not true. Women are not in the competition at all. You know, and the ILO says 19% of women are in the labor force. You know, 17% only of women have gone to ITIs. 6% of women are probably in blue collar jobs. 4%, 4.8%, something like that, of women, I don't want to give the decimal points, 4% of women, let's say, are in what they call engineering trades. Now, you'll find women working in womanly jobs and not in engineering trades. So their work is a soft kind of work. If you look at the periodic farm labor, periodic labor survey, PFLS, was it? Periodic something like that, labor survey, you'll find that have you heard of a category called NEET, NEET? Not in employment, education, or training. Not this competition. Not in education, employment, and training. 51% of women are not in education, employment, or training, and only 15% of men. So it is really a men versus men competition. The woman is really not in the picture as much. So very often when I talk about this, I want to emphasize this point because very often when I talk about this, they say men get all antsy because women are competing against them. It may happen in certain areas. It may happen definitely, but in the majority of areas, it is not a competition really between men and women. It's between men and men. That's what's happening, and that's true of India as well. Now, if you think of, I mean, look at this Punjab Agriculture University study. Have you seen a study which showed how much money parents have taken to send their children, mostly boys, abroad? You know, it's amazing. Sold their land, sold their tractors, they sold all kinds of things just to be able to send their children abroad. And 70% of the children going abroad, conservative estimators, they're men. And interestingly, 60% of them are from poor families, not rich families, poor families are doing the level best, selling everything just so that the men can do something in their lives. Let me go back to East UP, to Jaunpur. In Jaunpur, there are no carpet weaving happens. The Bhadoi, Jaunpur, that area, you know about that area? That area, when I went there in 2002 to 8, that area was the carpet capital of the world. 11% of world carpet trade was happening with the carpets produced in that strip near Banaras. Mirzapur, Bhadoi, Jaipur. So over there, go to the village, you'll find these elderly, unshaven people sitting around weaving carpets in a pit loom. Terrible condition, barely any light. And you ask them, who taught you to weave carpets? They said, my father. When did he teach you? When I was 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, something like that. How long did it take you? Well, 3 months. Because those carpets, by the way, are not the silk woven Kashmiri carpets. They're very simple carpets which are used, bought by H&M, IKEA, these companies. All right, your father taught you to weave carpets and this is an occupation. So now comes the killer question. Have you taught your children to weave carpets? And the killer answer in 100% cases is no. We don't want our children to lead the lives we have led. Now, you would think those children are at school doing reading, writing, arithmetic. No. They're the hands in the pockets, kicking the can, walking the streets, whistling away. But they will not weave carpets. What they will wait instead for is some way of getting to an urban slum. That's what they're looking out to. So this Punjab Agriculture University study I find very useful for now. We have some kind of body of information that tells you about, how hard they're trying for the men and how hard men are trying. Some of the stories that you hear about migration is really quite scary. When we come to the main body, you remember, some of you are probably too young to remember, but there was a time, not too long ago, when Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan, they all looked lissom and slender. And they were attractive, I thought. Remember those early films? They were slender looking people. And then suddenly they become muscular cutouts. It's talk about a whole collection of muscles. And today's films you'll find, whether there's a Bollywood film or a Tollywood film, you'll find all the hit films, not all, most of the hit films, you'll find men beating up men. They aren't romancing women anymore, like this romance in the early days. Now men are beating up men and women are somewhere in the background. And this thing of the masculine body has taken over completely. And most of the men, by the way, are the ones who go to see movies. 75% of men go to between 25 and 29 years of age. They are the ones who go to movies, and they are the ones who also go to gyms. So there's movies that cater to that population, and those movies you find a completely different kind of movies altogether, not like the ones I grew up on, where it was a boy and a girl, and the girl's father were opposed to the marriage, and then they get married, and happy patriarchy ever after, right? That is no longer there. Now all the movies are just killing each other, and the woman is somewhere in the background, sometimes not there at all. Consequently, what you see is tremendous expenditure and boom in exercise equipment. Today, exercise equipment is $5 billion. $5 billion. Can you imagine? And you have dietary supplements is $5.5 billion. And his most interesting is that in Q1 and Q2 of 2020, there was an enormous increase in fitness apps to the tune of 157% increase in fitness apps between this Q1 and Q2 period. I don't have figures for Q3, Q4, other years, but in 2020 Q1 and Q2, this was the picture. Now we come to the, well, all of this is okay, but now we come to the real sad part, and that is suicides. And suicides are growing enormously in our country, and it's very, very sad. In 1978, the suicide rate was 6.3 in 1 lakh population. Right? 6.3. That became 8.5 in 1980. Today it is over 12.4. The suicide rate. So as urbanization grew, so did the suicide rate. You know, urbanization was growing very slowly. It was very rapid early years. Around 1980 onwards, it slowed down. It slowed down and kept slowing down. In 2001, 2011 census, there was an uptake. And what an uptake it was. 19 new, 90, 19 new million plus cities grew in that 10 years. 19 new million plus cities. 2,774 new class 1 and class 2 municipality towns. This surge in urbanization is really worth paying attention to. And this surge we see also, unfortunately, in the increase in number of suicides. And suicides, as you know, 60% of suicides happen because, no, 47% of suicides happen because of joblessness. And 60% of them are matriculates, it's not illiterate people. So those who want to do something, make something of their lives, they are the ones who feel most disappointed, and they're the ones who ultimately take the final exit route and commit suicide. And you know, as I told you earlier, the figures I gave you earlier, in 1978, 6.3 in our life, and now it is 12.4. Yeah? Look at the huge jump. And this is closely related, according to me. I'm simple-minded, agree, but I think it's something that you will also find quite impressive, that this increase in suicide, and again, 75% of them are men. There's a recent article in Lancet, which brings home this point, about how men are committing suicide in very large numbers, and many of them, the majority of them are married men. And why is that so? It's not conjugal problems. It's because they feel they cannot look after their family. They have failed. Now, you know, what is the worst thing that a man could suffer from? Is not that you are accusing me of something. The worst thing a man can suffer from is when I fall in my own esteem. When you fall in your own esteem, that is something for which there's no remedy. You know, or the remedy is very difficult to find. You need counselors, etc., which people don't get. In India, suicides happen more in cities than in villages, because the village is the garden, the city is the citadel. You see? Now, in the West, interesting, this aside, in the West, most suicides happen in villages and not in cities. Why? Because in the West, the village is a lonely place. You know, only 2% of the population in the West are agricultural. It's a lonely place, not much help in terms of medicine or in terms of counseling. The city is okay in these facilities. India is the other way around. The village is where you are patriarchal, city you're on your own. So you feel more threatened, more lonely, and more isolated in the city than you would in the village. So the India is the reverse of what's in the West. Most suicides happen in cities. Well, in villages too, you have suicide. You have farmers' agitation, farmer suicide. Now, farmer suicide is about 7% of all suicides. Only 7% of farmer suicide. Where the newspapers that talk about it as if that's the only suicide in town. But farmer suicide is 7%. Now look at farmer suicide. It's very interesting. And this fact is not being brought up because people just don't pay attention to sociology, in my view. Where do farmer suicide take place? Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, in that order. Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. Okay, maximum contribution. Now, these four states are not the poorest states. They are probably the richest states. So farmer suicide don't take place in poor places. It doesn't take place as much. They do take place, but not as much as we say in UP or Bihar or Rajasthan, which are much poorer. So you would, if most people are talking about suicide, say poverty and all that stuff, which is true. But if it were just poverty, then it should not only happen in these places as much. It should happen in other places too, perhaps in greater numbers. Now, I think this is my view, and you might throw it aside. But now that I have a captive audience, let me put forward my point of view. My point of view is simply this: Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, this area. And those of us who've done some sociology or anthropology know that there is a difference between the Dravidian system of kinship and the non-Dravidian system of kinship. In the Dravidian system of kinship, you have cousin marriage. And in cousin marriage, the families are not unknown to each other, and they're probably of the same status. In North India, we have Kanyadan more than anything else, where what is very important is the bride giver should be inferior to the bride taker, which is why you have things of dowry, etc., etc. Now, second point, in all these cases of farmers' indebtedness, not necessarily suicide, indebtedness, you'll find the farmer first goes to the bank, to institutional source of credit. When an institutional source of credit is no longer available because he's failed to pay back, then the farmer goes to the unofficial, informal sources of credit. When that dries up, because the farmer cannot pay that loan back either, then who does the farmer turn to? Farmer turns to organizations. These organizations are useless because they are all it's a right relationship with us, right? And his terms of right relations I found quite strangely enough, both in the north and in the south. Now, if you turn to a right relation in the south, where the bridegroom and bride taker are more or less equal, if you can't pay back that loan, their pain stake is much greater than in North India, where it is the job of the bride giver to keep supporting the bride there's some old system of exchange. I mean, you may have read much of this in Dumont, in Troutman, in Iravati Karve. They will told you about the cousin marriage that prevails from south to up to Maharashtra, maybe parts of Gujarat as well. And there you find larger numbers of people, farmers committing suicide than outside. I did a kind of study also of the regions of Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand, where you have tribal families, tribal societies, where there is cross cousin marriage and where there is no cross cousin marriage. And I found that where there is cross cousin marriage, suicides are more frequent than where there is not. So anyway, this is another point I'm going to make in this connection. That is, when you feel ashamed at home, that shame is very difficult to take. So farmer suicide is not simply indebtedness. Indebtedness is okay, I don't pay back. So many corporates don't pay back at all, you know, and they don't think paying back is an important thing. You know, and I've been to many corporate discussions where paying back a loan is not on the agenda. But if a farmer cannot pay back to his wife's relation, especially in a situation where the Dravidian system of kinship prevails, the result is that much greater. Yes, and that's a few facts to sustain this particular point of view. Now, what is the future of anxiety? The future of anxiety, I think, is rather optimistic. And the reason it is optimistic is that as we in the cities, the joint family is breaking down. The joint family breaking down in the nuclear. In 2008, very recent by the way, 34% families are nuclear, 34% in 2008. Today, 34%. Today is 58%. That is, in 14 years, look at the jump. In a few more years, it will increase even more. So what happens in a nuclear family? The oligarchy of cousins, not just children, the oligarchy of cousins, the oligarchy of males in the family, that is reduced. Because the father now, or the husband, is a lonely male surrounded by women and children who are now exercising their opinion. And you'll find that women now are beginning to get training, beginning to get jobs, beginning to be educated, almost at par with the men in the family. So as time goes by, these women will be highly qualified. And they may not even want to have children, like it happened in Korea. In South Korea, women don't want to have children. They've seen through it all. Having children is a waste of time. So they don't want to have children at all. Now, whatever it is, the point really is that now women will begin to say, that, I am something in my own right. What is more? Why is it good news for men? After some time, men will find it very difficult initially, but after some time, men will see it's a liberating factor because they're no longer cast as the sole breadwinner. They're not the sole breadwinner anymore. And because they're not the sole breadwinner anymore, culturally the relationship will change within the family. So, in my view, don't despair. Anxiety will come to an end. Tagore had once said, and all Bengalis must end with Tagore. Tagore once said that ants grow wings before they perish. I think anxiety grows muscles before it perishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta, for a very thought-provoking lecture. You brought new ideas to the concept of urbanization, relating it with masculinity. And for this, your ideas, I find you talk of the muscular man emerging, but when you look at the waves of migration patterns, they have always been male migrations in the initial stages. It is only now when the information technology has developed and the IT sector and has advanced to getting education that the women are also migrating or the whole
Household migration.
also migrating.
Household migration, you're right.
Whole households are migrating because in Chandigarh itself, I observed that those migrants who came earlier, they have brought their families to settle down there and they are there forever. And then they not only settle down themselves, they also bring their larger joint family members from the right side or their own side to settle down in the city, and that is how the city is grown. And your point about masculinity or muscular man is is an idea which I found is very challenging because men who move first to the city are definitely required to become self-made, get employment, develop their own connections in the city so that they can carry on with their day-to-day lives and also find their jobs suitable to their
Qualifications.
abilities. And when you, what seems very new to me is relating this muscular man with the new concepts that are arising in different nation states in other cultures. So these are some of the ideas that you have very rightly brought out the relationship between these farmers' movements and their family structures. But in Punjab, also, we are witnessing a lot of farmer suicides. How would you explain those? That is my question. Thank you very much for a very stimulating discussion and stimulating our thought process. Now I would like the audience to ask Professor Dipankar questions.
I'm glad. Thank you very much. I want to just add, may help in our discussion. That is, the muscular man is one aspect of masculinity. It's not all of it, only one aspect. And that I said earlier is because of self-censorship. Body is the only area that's controlled over. But I also want to bring this to attention. And very often I've heard people say that this leads to uh, attacks on women. Okay? But that's not true. But if Punjab, you take context Punjab, that is this. That Punjab emigrated many years ago, around time when Professor Madan Puri and others were here. Shantanu was here, the son. I saw gyms everywhere. In Ludhiana district, wherever you go, in even Tarantara, gyms everywhere. But and then now you have Musewala. Musewala says things like, "You dare cross my path, and I'll finish you off." You know, I have AK-47 made in Korea. All these songs are there. But in Punjab, with all the masculinity, is number 19 on cases of rape. Number 25, cases of violence against women. So being muscular and being this masculinity doesn't mean beating up women. In fact, it means beating up men. You know, so attacking against women is not primary in this particular scheme of things. And this is something which I want to emphasize because whenever one talks of masculinity, generally, it's about men behaving badly. And when men behave badly, it's against women. But in this particular case, I don't think that really holds. And when families come out to be first, as you said rightly, men come out first. Now, in Dharavi slums, you'll find when the plague happened, the COVID happened, Dharavi slums, a huge exodus. But when the ultimate tally was taken, they found that only 10% had left Dharavi. And that 10% were single men. Men with families stayed on. The only single men who said, I don't want to die alone. They are the ones who left for the village. They didn't leave, in my view, because there was no job. Because these men are used to being unemployed for months. You know, to leave on the second day is not that their type. They didn't leave because there was no job. Their first impulse was, I don't want to die alone, and no, funeral services being done for me. That's why they left. In Surat in 1977, 1978, I was there, and there was a scare that one of the satellites in the space had disintegrated, and the big chunk was coming to Surat. And there was such a rush of workers in the railway station all wanted to go home. Not because they lost their jobs, but because the chunk was in their heads. Without being attended to. So men come out looking for work. Over time, they bring the women in. When women in the slums, they are settled. You know, and the man may bring his parents, he may bring his uncles, and the man is the boss, not the uncles, not the parents in this new house. Thank you. It's easy to compress 100 years. You know? Say you read a book of history,
Okay, madam.
1831 to 1931. It looks like 100 years. But when living those 100 years, it takes a lot of time. So it's going to take time, of course. But just ask yourself, I'm now going to be another 3 or 4 months. No, 6 months, I'm going to be 75. Right? Now, when I look back, I see such a huge change in my own life. But it took me 60 years at least to understand this. So it will happen. I think the pace is increasing, it's going faster. One of the things I learned about when I was studying modernization was that in modern societies, time keeps yapping at your heels. It makes you move faster and faster. So time is moving very fast. It also answers your question. So it moves very fast. So in my view, if you just look back, look at the change. You are all here. We're all sitting as equals. You're probably smarter than most of us, and that's the way it is. And after some time,
So, just a small observation. I have seen that even in the basic course, stratification, which I had earlier years ago, they were speaking about it. I think all the attractions did come out from these two books. These different platform do you draw that
no, it's not I'm being unnecessarily optimistic. It's just that when I think back in my own life, I find certain things that my mother, for example, in her time, and my grandmother, a woman working was supposed to be an insult to the man. That he's not able to provide for his family. Today, you don't think that way. I'm talking only of a certain class. Now you will find something very interesting. You look at the statistics. When the husband's income goes beyond 40,000 rupees, the woman enters the job market because there's confidence now. That I'm not entering the job market because my husband is poor. I'm entering it because 40,000 rupees is pretty good salary. It's like the nano car. The nano car didn't take off because it was a poor man's car. Nobody wanted to be identified as a poor man. So things are changing, and when you're living it, it's like a very long time. But when you look back, it's gone. You see, the peer pressure aspect is well taken. But the fact also is that they don't think much of their parents. You see, what I'm trying to talk about is this masculinity is not the same as patriarchy. So very often people collapse the two. Now, what you're saying completely fits in with my presentation because they don't really see their parents as role models anymore. You know, like earlier, parents were everything. Now you parents, those old people, they're not role models, and this is not just middle class folks like us. As I was telling you earlier, even in villages, I found that young boys are not really very respectful towards their parents.
No, the second part is true. Is not related to patriarchy at all. The first part was, for example, the Nirbhaya case. On the Nirbhaya case, that those are things that people very quickly identify that with masculinity. I don't think that's true because masculinity, and the way I'm putting it, and I think that is the new way of looking at it, even if I may say so, rape has always been there in our country, in all societies. And this kind of rape we saw in Nirbhaya is there everywhere. It happened in urban India, that was something new. But rape is a very common thing. Now, why did they bring in Punjab? Simply because Punjab is, quote unquote, a very stereotypical masculine place. And yet, in Punjab, rape and crime against women are very low. So there is no straightforward correlation between masculinity and that. And I think this is important because it's so easy to say masculinity leads to this. But the first casualty in masculinity is the man himself, you know, and that casualty is something that we don't pay attention to. And in terms of male bonding, yes, of course, there's male bonding because we have not been able to understand yet. There have been many uh, energetic studies, I should say, on this phenomenon. They tried very hard, but they've not been able to find any sociological reason why men and women should sit separately and gossip separately. But because men gossip separately doesn't mean there's overwhelming bonding. There is this competition. That gossip is very competitive. You'll find some people, someone saying, when I was the CEO, the sales went up by so and so. This person will try and bring in some other aspect. When I was CEO, I made sure that our products went to Northeast. So there's always a hidden element of competition in many of these masculine talks. So, for example, when I have nothing to compete because I'm out of it altogether. So I listen to much of this, and I feel sorry for them because they're really pushing themselves so hard. And I wish I were a woman because they seem to be having a better time. Not Haryana, not Haryana. Yeah. No, I mean that's true, but I was in the Reforms Commission in Punjab, and I can tell you this much that Punjab reporting is very good, better than many other parts of the country, better than UP, better than Bihar, much better. So the thing is that to equate masculinity with rape or crime against women is taking a very narrow view. That can happen anywhere. But the new thing that's happening is this masculinity is not the same as patriarchy. This is what I'm trying to draw attention to. Okay, are we done? Yes.
May I say something? I'm the virtual audience.
I'm sure there's something to do with architecture as well, but that's for another day. I wanted it to be a lady there. Sorry? Amarjit. Amarjit. Indrajit and Indrajit of Patiala. In Sangrur. Badruka. Yeah, I know the book. I know. He's my relation. I know the book very well. He's my wife's cousin. I know I went with him to Sangrur and other places, and there's also this. He's done a lot of work, and it's quite. When I was with him in Sangrur and Jean, that entire area, there I realized how women in the family where suicide had taken place had no idea who the man had taken money from. You know, because it was, and when the man commits suicide, it's a shock because they always felt that they're doing well, and suddenly it's gone. Now, I didn't think of this how kind of isolated women were in the man's economic life. 50% of the students in the college that were children of that, yeah, orphans of that. Yes. Yeah. You see, when you go to Europe, migration will continue. When you go to villages, let's say you go to a village in Europe, and this is a village, but in that village you will find that probably three families are agriculturalists. The rest are urban people who drive up and down. You know, so though they technically live in a village, they are not villagers in that sense. And this village has got everything. It probably has a Nike and a Benetton and a film hall and a good doctor and a good school. In other words, that village, by our standards, is urban. The facilities they have. The point really is that where are the facilities? And if the facilities are there, will people move? They will not move if the facility also comes with a job. There's a village I know in the Basque area of Spain where I spent some time, where they work very hard to make sure that the children of the village can drive Lamborghini. You know, that ambition was made known to us by the head of the church. He wanted the children of the village not to leave the village, but to live in the village and get rich. And his solution was to make cheese of very high quality. So what he did was he brought the best machinery, the best technology to make cheese, and the cheese was so good it had a huge market in South America. I don't know about Lamborghini, but those kids are really living well in the village. So it is not about the village remaining a good village. That village is no longer a village. It is actually a city, and that's what has to happen. You can make a smart village, but when you look back, you say, "My gosh, this village is not a village at all." I think that is the direction where we should move. In fact, our earlier president, Abul APJ Abul, oh gosh. Anyway, it was his. What was this thing he tried to do? Pura. Providing urban services. Yeah, Pura. Yeah, that was what he wanted to do, but people have forgotten about it. They don't do it anymore. Today, if I want to live in a village, I mean, there's no doctors, there's no school. What will I do there? But in a European village, everything is available. Well, if I forget Europe, I mean, you go to Kentucky, which is, wherever in America, and you go to buy a plot of land there, you have schools, colleges, Benetton, Nike, everything available. Okay.
Sir, there are some questions online. Thank you, sir, for a very interesting lecture, which had so many insights of phenomena in our rapidly changing rural-urban landscape, especially on how some of these has a bearing on anxiety society, how all the social change, migration, employment has a bearing on well-being in society. I haven't been to a sociology lecture in a long time, so it's nice to listen.
Any questions?
In the large debate from Aditya Sharma, in the large debate of urbanization and masculinity, how does one understand the surge of bodybuilding competitions and fitness centers in India in the last decade? Has it something to do with neo-imperialism and market forces at play?
No, that question doesn't really resonate here because neoliberalism market is everywhere. Yes, of course. If you have a huge sale, like I said, $5 billion in exercise equipment, $5 billion in dietary supplements, there is a market, of course. But behind the market, there has to be an urge. Is that urge I'm talking about? Why do people buy exercise equipment? Why do they go in for dietary supplements? Even though some dietary supplements are quite dangerous. still go in for that? Now, that is the question which I would like to ask. And if there is, of course, a fallout in terms of neoliberalism, capitalism, that's important, but not quite in my domain right now.
Sumita, sir, as you said, the number of suicide is high among the married men. As we are aware of Durkheim's analysis of suicide, that talks about the opposite of it. That suicide happens more among unmarried than the married people. What if we strengthen the village, which is soul of a nation? All that crisis can be reduced. Sir, as you said, competition is going on among men only, not between men and women. My question is, how can it be possible if we do not recognize their presence in the fields they are in?
It's okay.
If masculinity,
Well, it's true. It's true that that women. It's true what you're saying, but the point really is that the reason why bodybuilding and muscularity is important is because of the internal kind of panopticon. You know the panopticon that people talk about, but there's an internal panopticon that is constantly censoring yourself. That is what is quite interesting.
if masculinity which you are discussing is not patriarchy, does it mean that masculinity is now an non-oppressive phenomena in urban areas?
We're oppressing men. So, these
are some of the things.
Well, thank you very much.
I would like to ask. Hello.
Speaker of the day, actually, and he volunteered because we were talking something, and he said, "I am here in Chandigarh." So it's great, sir, that you came, and more than 100 people joined online also. So I hope you have benefited with your lecture. In the institute, we have been working on some of these dimensions, and our analysis also in urban areas show that in cities, some of the islands of deprivation and like marginal subcultural spaces are emerging in the form of slum areas, where this problem is even more acute because of engagement of women in the informal sector and dependency, overcrowding in the houses, etc. So these problems are but I think one positive thing which has emerged in the last 25 years is that the 75 and 70 constitution, which have given a large number of women in panchayats as well as in municipalities, urban localities, and they are coming now in decision making and deciding the things what to do, how to do. And also emerging in the, of course, there are political areas, social and economic concerns and all. So thank you very much, and I thank Professor R.M. Sethi. I requested her only 24 hours back that please come and try to moderate this lecture, and Professor Gupta, Sarmaji, Chadda service from Professor Chadda is head of the Maxima Institute.
यूनिवर्सिटी क्षेत्र चेक कर लो
Namita Gupta is also from social work. So this introduces me, and a lot of people, human rights, and a lot of people connected online, about 100 people.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. But I'm very grateful you had her come here because I'm meeting after a long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.